Hey guys, this is a video on alcohol. It's summer and so I get a lot of questions. I think when it's summer, when it's hot outside, it's summer here and most of my clients all my clients actually live in the northern hemisphere. So when it's summer, all my clients are asking me about alcohol, and I think it's just because the weather is so nice to drink a beer. And you're out more and you're with friends and probably your alcohol consumption increases, and so I get a lot of questions regarding that. So I wanted to make a video about it to give you the tools to make an informed decision for yourself. Alcohol is a super complex, just like food, is a super complex problem in the sense that there's a personal aspect to it, there's a cultural aspect, right? Like your family history, but also like where you live is important, the culture that you grew up with is important, there's an cultural, emotional view of alcohol which is indispensable and you cannot just like deny it. Just like there is with food, right? Like how important is food in family relationships, on a relationship with your friends and so on. So that has to be considered, but also biological differences, right? Like if you're tall, small, more muscle mass, less muscle mass, what are your personal goals, right? Like are you trying to increase athletic performance? Are you trying to maximize longevity and health markers, right? Like depends on what you want, and depends on where you're living, your environment and so on, right? Like, and depends on your mental health past and your genetics. There's a lot of variance there. There's a lot of variables that we have to consider. So I don't expect that at the end of the video I'll give you like a hard line. Although, you know, like I'll try to give you some kind of, you know, like heuristic. But of course, I cannot give a one-size-fits-all approach. What I try to do is like what I will try to do is to provide you with a system thinking view so that you can parse all the pieces of the puzzle together. So let's start by clarifying some concepts that are important and that I will be using throughout this video. So the first, we will define light and moderate drinking as the same, and it's going to be 1 or less drinks per day and at most 7 drinks per week, right? So that allows us that, like, if you didn't drink Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, and on Friday you drink four beers, 4 drinks, you're good. 1 drink is 1 drink, like 2 ounces of beer, 1 glass of wine, a little bit of whiskey. You know, like let's not complicate things. I could give you like very specific measurements, but I don't think we need it. Good. So that's light to moderate drinking. Heavy drinking starts when you drink 2 or more drinks per day, or 14 or more drinks per week, which is actually something that is very a lot of people live there, right? Like and of course between light drinking and heavy drinking there's a range that you have to be careful there, you know, like 7 drinks per week, and you know, like in this video what you'll see is that there's a lot of, we're simplifying a lot, and with that simplification errors are made, and we have to accept that. Third thing is we define binge drinking as more than 5 drinks in the same event. Time of consumption, as we'll see, time of consumption of alcohol really matters, right? Like how often are you drinking really matters in your metabolism, but we'll define binge drinking as such. And those are our basic numbers, right? Like light, moderate, heavy, and then binge drinking. I am following the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse here in the US for those numbers. And one of the things that is important there is those numbers are usually, and this is common to all alcohol research, is usually divided in female and males. And that's silly to me, because if you really learn about alcohol metabolism, you'll see that sex, although plays is a determinant, it's a variable, and like metabolism of alcohol does change, just varies between female and women, female and male. Usually the numbers are multiplied by 2, so in the case of light alcohol consumption, for example, for women it will be considered 1 drink or less per day, and for males will be 2, and that is just silly. 2 humans of the same size, same muscle mass, same amount of body fat and similar size of organs will tend to have very similar alcohol metabolism regardless of sex, right? Like it's hard to find those two humans that are like that, but the multiplication by 2 because of biological sex is silly. It's a cultural prejudice in which like you really think that alcohol, that males should be able to drink more or can handle more alcohol. So I go with just one number, and I go with the lower one, with the one that is usually given for females, because actually females are better at metabolizing alcohol. You could make that claim easier if you were to make a claim. It's still a silly claim, but you could make a case much better there. And so, you know, we'll go with the hard line, with the good one. Okay, so those are our baselines.
All right.
One last assumption. Okay, one last disclaimer, and it's my own personal views on alcohol. I don't drink, not by choice, really kind of happened to me. I don't like, if you offer me a non-alcoholic beer and a beer, I prefer the non-alcoholic beer. Just like if you were gonna present me a Sprite and a Coke, I would choose the Coke. Not because I'm like, no, I don't do Sprite, just I prefer the Coke. Because I don't in particular enjoy being bossed, or, you know, like I don't enjoy the physiological effect of alcohol by preference. I'm not trying to maximize, not consciously at least, not trying to maximize my health there. And so, and I don't know for how long I haven't drank. If you were to ask me, I don't know. And that doesn't mean that I don't drink, like, right? Like if you were to give me a very, very good whiskey, I would probably drink it. So it's not a hard line, but I don't remember when was the last time I drank. I used to be a heavy drinker for sure all through my 20s, and that didn't lead to anywhere good in my life. That's my personal story. So I lowered my consumption through my 30s, gradually. Not, it wasn't designed, you know, like it wasn't on design. It just kind of, it was what my life was asking me to do, right? That's my view. I don't have any moral judgments, or I don't think alcohol per se is silly. I think we culturally do value it a little bit more than we need to, but I understand why. Okay, so now that we have done that, all that long disclaimer, sorry, we needed it. This video is gonna be mostly dealing with light to moderate drinkers, right? Like people that is drinking 1 or less drink per meal, per day. We know that heavy drinking, we have enough evidence and data to know that heavy drinking creates more health issues than it solves in some way. So again, if you are a heavy drinker, what you have to do is the trade-offs, right? Like, so look at the equation of what you're losing. You're losing sleep quality, you're creating a havoc in your hormones, you're increasing your chances of different kinds of cancers and so on. So we know all that, and what you have to think about that is the trade-offs. What is it getting you, right? Like, and how much do you value that, and right? And so I'm not talking about the case of heavy drinkers. I'm gonna leave it there just because the evidence is so compelling that the health problems are meaningful. Most people that is watching this video are probably in 2 drinks or less per day, right? So it includes pretty much. I'm not excluding a huge amount of people there, right? Like, so we're gonna go there. So now that we have that, let's talk about the things. So the first thing is, how does alcohol work? How does it go into your body and what happens? So the first thing that you should know is that there's protein, carbs, fat, and alcohol is a whole thing on its own. It does provide calories. It's not a carbohydrate like most people think. Ethanol, which is the molecule of alcohol, does provide calories, but it's not a carbohydrate, it's an alcohol. But it has no nutrients. Right? So those are fundamentals. There is no nutrients other than the calories that it provides, which is not a nutrient, it's just energy. And the second thing is that your body prioritizes the metabolization of alcohol. So if you're consuming alcohol and any other food, your body will be like, no, 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 let me deal with alcohol first than anything else. It's not clear why that happens. It's not clear if the body considers alcohol itself as a toxin or one of its subproducts, which we'll talk in a second, as a toxin. What matters is that your body will prioritize the metabolization of alcohol or anything else, and that happens. There's the first part of metabolizing alcohol happens on the stomach. Heavy drinkers will not, will adapt and will not deal with alcohol in the stomach. They will just pass to the liver, which is the main organ that will metabolize alcohol. And then whatever alcohol is not metabolized in the liver goes to the intestines, and the intestines metabolize alcohol too, right? Like, and by metabolize, what we mean is we turn that ethanol into calories, into energy, right? Good. In that metabolization that happens in the body, mostly at the liver, there's one subproduct that is ethanol. It's a known carcinogen, and is definitely a molecule that your body can metabolize, and it will turn it into acetyl-CoA, which is a molecule that will go into the Krebs cycle and produce energy, and that's how alcohol is turned into energy. But and so the body can produce it, but that is in the meantime, while it's being metabolized, when it's in your body, it can create a lot of havoc. Ethanol with an A at the end. So we don't really know. There's people that think that alcohol is in itself the toxin and your body identifies it as such, or that is ethanol. It doesn't matter what, we will find out better as we get more data over the years. But what we know is that because of this toxicity, your body wants to deal with it faster. The other thing to take into consideration here is that alcohol will be metabolized into energy. There's no other thing to do with alcohol. It's not stored in the body like fat could be or carbohydrates, so it's gonna produce energy, right? Like, there's nothing else to do with alcohol in the body, right? Like, your body has to break it, turn it into energy, which means that often what will happen is that your body, especially when you're a heavy drinker and you're not binge drinking, your body will auto-regulate the amount of calories. Your body always is auto-regulating the amount of calories. That's why you cannot just eat less and exercise more, like we always try, because your body will adjust. Your body is not stupid, and so you might do a little bit of binge eating that night just because you're drunk and there's all these psychological effects and you don't feel hunger, but the next few days you will not, and so it messes with your calorie consumption, and because it's a nutrient null food, for lack of a better word, because alcohol has no nutrients, then you're changing empty calories for good calories, right? Like you're missing out a little bit. And the last thing is that alcohol creates a little bit of cellular dysregulation, in the sense that when alcohol is metabolized, it creates a couple of molecules, NADH, that mess with the production of energy at the mitochondrial level, because it changes the ratio of NAD to NADH. And that can be problematic, especially for athletic performance, and over time can be problematic. Apart from that, alcohol is a muscle relaxant and it dilates your veins and arteries, right? And so those are the main considerations when it comes to alcohol metabolism. Good. Second topic, alcohol and hormones. So the impact on the hormonal on the endocrine system is huge from alcohol, but mostly for heavy drinkers. Light drinkers will not mess with the hormone system all that much. There's a couple of things that will happen for the light drinker. First, definitely an impact on testosterone, progesterone, very measurable for light drinking, right? Like, so decreased levels of testosterone, increased level of progesterone. So right, so those are important those increases are not huge, or decreases are not huge, so you know, like not super meaningful, but they're there. The main problem is with the sugar hormones, with insulin and glucagon, and it's because what happens here is glucagon is a hormone that is complementary to insulin, right? Like, so when there is a lot of sugar in the bloodstream, insulin is released to get to turn that sugar, bring the sugar into the cells and turn it into fat, right? Like deal with the sugar. Glucagon is the opposite. When there's not enough sugar in the system, glucagon is the hormone that tells the liver to, like, hey, get me some sugar out here, and that can be from glycogen stores, or glucose stores, or it can be from fat, from fatty tissue, right? Like, so it's the other part of the system, and we tend to be super concentrated on insulin, but we actually, to make the system work good, we have to have a good balance of both hormones. And alcohol inhibits the production of the release of glucagon, and that is mostly because the system is so taxed dealing with alcohol that is not tracking if you need a little bit more sugar in the system, right? Like, it's not gonna metabolize fat into sugar. So now we're gonna go to sleep and alcohol. This is a topic that has been very well researched and is super important. We used to believe that alcohol really affected REM sleep, and that there's some truth to that, but what's more important is that alcohol, and it doesn't have to be heavy use, just 2 or more drinks, do have a very big effect on sleep. How does this work? And you will tell me, like, Juan, I sleep better when I'm drinking, when I drink, and a lot of people use alcohol as a sleep aid. For sure, because that's exactly what alcohol does. So alcohol will increase the levels of adenosine. It's not very well explained why, but it makes sense to me in the sense that alcohol wants, like, your body wants to shut you down so that you stop drinking, and so it puts you to bed, which is probably what you have experienced in your life. If you're drunk enough, you're like, yeah, what you need is to sleep, it's just sleep, right? And so your body knows better. But the alcohol consumption will increase the hormone of adenosine, which is, you can think of adenosine as the hormone that really creates sleep pressure. It's like, we need to sleep, we need to sleep, we need to sleep, and we build up that hormone throughout the day, so that when there's a night, there's a lot of sleep pressure. What happens, for example, with caffeine is caffeine blocks the reception of that hormone, so you don't feel the pressure, and with caffeine is metabolized, suddenly you feel the pressure. So that's why you, for example, when you're drinking a lot of coffee in the morning and then at 3 p.m. you crash, it's not because you were more sleepy than before, you weren't feeling that pressure, and now suddenly you feel it all. Anyhow, so alcohol does that, and what happens, and in principle that wouldn't be a negative, you'll be like, yeah, I want to sleep, and you're like, I need help falling asleep, so you're telling me it does, and it does. But the problem is that it puts you in a deeper, in a slow wave cycle of sleep, like a super deep sleep for the first half of the night, deeper than you usually would, and then it disrupts your sleep in the second half of your night. And we have this very well documented for light drinkers, heavy drinkers, and so on, right? And so what happens is you will feel that good need for sleep, and that this sleep in the first half of the night, but then the second half of the night you're awake more, and your sleep is lighter because your body will compensate. So if you were sleeping really hard here, then you will provide more light sleep here. The REM sleep, which is fundamental for the processing of memories and emotions, it varies, right? So we used to believe that it was a completely inhibitor of that. For light drinkers, that doesn't seem to be the case. It seems that for light drinkers, REM is not inhibited, but for heavy drinkers and binge drinkers, it seems to be the case. That doesn't mean that you don't dream. That just means that your overall amount of REM sleep is less than ideal, and that explains why heavy drinkers have a very hard time with PTSD and so on, because they cannot let the body deal with their emotional state while asleep, which is fundamental for processing trauma. So that's you know, like that's how sleep works. So that explains why when you use it as a sleep aid, it works, but also why it's not a good long-term solution. So using alcohol as a sleep aid is short-term good, long-term not so good. And that also explains why when you wake up after sleeping with alcohol, even if you didn't drink too much, or even if you don't have a hangover, you still don't feel as rested. That is the main aspect of alcohol and sleep. There's a second aspect of sleep. In the past 5 years, we have developed a lot of sleep tracking and sleep tracking technology, which is very, very fun. In this commercial enterprise and commercial data, we have discovered that alcohol, even light drinking, has a considerable impact in athletic performance and recovery. And so that's been very well measured. However, it's commercial data that is not readily available to for review, and so this data we cannot fully trust just because we don't have it. But that's what those companies like Whoop and Aura report, right? That alcohol has a very big impact on recovery and athletic performance. So those are the main impacts, and you're probably thinking, well, you're just telling me all the bad stuff. Where is the good stuff? Where is the research that says that one glass of wine a day is great for you? And so I went and researched all that. So there's, in the 60s and all through the 60s and 90s, we used to, there was some evidence and some data showing that light and moderate consumption of alcohol had less impact or was associated with a lower risk of cardiovascular disease. But this research, unfortunately, it seemed to have a lot of bias, which makes sense, and it was proven that, like, the way they were choosing their patients or the samples was not very smart. And so in the last few years we have re-evaluated that light and moderate drinking lowers the risk of cardiovascular disease, and it seems that is not as statistically different as we used to believe. There's the other belief that wine is good for your metabolic health, in the sense that it helps with mitochondrial health, and that makes total sense, because some of the compounds of grapes those help with mitochondrial health. But again, it's one of those things that is like a little bit of linear thinking, in which you just need to find one good reason to justify your consumption, but you're obviating the rest of all the other reasons, right? And the positive effects of alcohol don't, in those cases, in the physiological term, in my research, don't seem to be very well documented at all. Now, as I said at the beginning of this video, the problem is a little bit more complex than just the physiology of the thing, because we're not just physiological beings, we're social, psychological beings too. And we are alive, and all that we do in life is not to optimize our health and do exactly and everything that is excellent for longevity and health markers. That would be super boring. Sometimes it's fun to eat just for pleasure. I tell people sometimes it's good to train, but sometimes you have to go and play and use your body for the pleasure of being alive, right? And you should do that often, because life is short. And so part of that consideration should be taken into consideration with alcohol. If alcohol is something that you enjoy, light to moderate drinking seems to not have like huge effects. Like, all the effects that I'm describing here are not super huge. Light to moderate drinking is not related to there's a very well documented research on cancer and alcohol drinking for heavy drinking and and abuse of alcohol. This is not true for light drinking. There's not so much of that, and so like the risks are very little. And even though it will affect sleep or hormone balances and all the things that I'm doing, what you have to do is like a trade-off, trades thinking, right? Like, like if you're a heavy drinker, the trade-offs will be really against you. I mean, it depends on who you are and what you want, but like my guess is that like if you're a heavy drinker, the trade-offs are like really not helping you all that much. If you like I always tell people, if you wake up feeling hangover and say like I should never do this again, never do it again, right? Like it's as simple as that. But for light drinkers, the trade-offs have to be evaluated more carefully, because if it's called like I have had the case of athletes in which we take the one drink and then they don't relax, and it's not because alcohol relaxes you, not at all. It does, it is a muscle relaxant, but like it's physiological properties are not like really to put you in a state of rest and digest, right? Like quite the opposite. It has to metabolize that as a toxin, so it's not a rest and digest thing. But your culture and your growing up really associate that behavior with relaxing, and that trumps everything, right? And so if that's your case, I would consider that, because again, 1 to 2 drinks, light drinking is really not the trade-offs do not play out, right? Like, so if you're there, like consider that and know that there's value, there's inherent value into a behavior that will cost you physiologically something, will cost you biologically something in terms of longevity, health marks, but we're dying regardless, right? Like, and it's like I love exercising, right? Like, and that has some cost too, right? Like, it's not just good for you. There's some cost there, but I do my trade-offs thinking, and like I do that. So there's always a little bit of a trade-offs there. So take into consideration those uses, social uses. So if that's the way that you bond with your friends, relationships are fundamental in your overall health. So sure, it will be a minus in some aspects, but a big set of plus in the other ones, right? And so make sure that you're taking those into consideration, because they're important and they will also provide health, right? Like, the equation is not going to be, just because there's a negative doesn't mean that there are not 4 positives that like balance the thing out, right? Like, so you have to think with a little bit of complexity there. And the last thing is make sure that if you're gonna go and if you're gonna do some drinking, do it smartly, right? Like, so what I said there counts. Don't worry too much about calories. What you should worry is that you're buying quality like everything else, because fuck it, if you're gonna drink, why do it cheaply? That's silly, but no, make sure that you have water, make sure that you have an empty stomach, make sure that you're spacing your drinks for an hour, and you'll be good. Like, you'll be maximizing your drinking experience. Anyhow, I hope this helps, and I hope this explains something. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll post the references for this video are really good. If you really want to read them, I highly recommend them. The one on sleep is great, the one on metabolism is dense as fuck, but it's worth it, and the one on the endocrine system is also very dense, but totally worth it. So check them out, and that is it.